Everybody rejoice! Yet another streaming service has brought out yet another series about superheroes. Grab your coffee and have a seat, and let's have a quick morning chat about Netflix's new series, The Guardians of Justice. Hello, and thank you for joining me. I'm Steve the Cat, host of PBDC TV's horror movie discussion program, Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Now, in normal episodes of my show, we review horror movies, but if you've listened to my show, you know that I also love science fiction and superhero stuff as well. So I like to use these Breakfast Express episodes to sometimes branch out and talk about other things. So this morning, we are going to talk about a new series from Netflix called The Guardians of Justice, which is a superhero series. The thing that makes this one, I guess, stand out is that it is created by Adi Shankar, who is famous for having directed films like Dredd and The Grey, and then most notably was involved in producing the Castlevania series on Netflix, which I really liked. And it's one of those things that it's an alternate history superhero film, or series, much like Watchmen, where world history diverges from our history right around the end of the Second World War, and the story takes place in 1987. And the most interesting thing about this is it's some live action mixed with a lot of animation, and not just animation, but many, many different styles of animation, several different styles of 2D pen and ink traditional animation. You've got 8-bit computer animation. You've got some stop-motion claymation animation. It's all thrown in together. So, bottom line up front, no. No. I cannot recommend this series. No. Just no. I'd like to say it's an interesting idea or an interesting premise, just not executed well, but at this point, even the idea and the premise of this has been done to death. Is just so derivative, and it is so poorly executed. Some of the animation is interesting, but it's just not enough to make me want to enjoy this. So comic book fans might want to hate watch this one, but you're probably not going to like it. So let's give you a quick summary. This is a 7-episode superhero series. It takes place in the year 1987, but takes place on an Earth with an alternate history that is different from our own, was the same as ours until about the end of the Second World War, and then it started to diverge. On this alternate Earth, World War II led almost immediately into World War III, which was then stopped by the arrival of an extraterrestrial named Marvelous Man. Yes, think Superman, and you have Marvelous Man. And Marvelous Man's arrival more or less heralds a decade or many decades of world peace. If you kind of ignore the fact that behind the scenes, all the nations of the world are still very distrustful of each other and still worried that Marvelous Man might side with their enemies against them, so they're all still kind of itching to push that button for the launch of nuclear missiles. And if this all sounds familiar and sounds like Watchmen, yeah. Marvelous Man ends up dead, and then you have the rest of the Guardians of Justice trying to investigate to find out what happened. So, things to like about the Guardians of Justice. Not much. Okay, it is a superhero series, so if you're into superhero series, it's yet another thing to choose from. It is kind of a gritty, alternate take on the superhero genre, kind of like Watchmen or The Boys, so again, if that's up your alley, I can see how you would be fooled into watching this. Some of the animation is interesting. As I said, this show is a mixture of live action and numerous forms of animation, several different styles of traditional animation. There is some 3D computer animation, there is some 8-bit graphics animation, and there is some claymation stop motion thrown in as well, and they kind of come at you hard and fast, sometimes switching from one form to another real quickly. Some of it's really interesting, but some of it, it goes by so fast that it's hard to say sometimes. It reminds me a lot, if you're old enough to remember the days of MTV's Liquid Television, reminds me of some of the programming you would have seen then. So, visually, some aspects of it are interesting. Things to dislike about the Guardians of Justice. Well, there's a whole lot of them, but let's start with the obvious, which is the acting. The acting is just god-awful. There's no way around it. It is just horrible from top to bottom. The actor playing the lead character in this series is a former professional wrestler, and yes, it is a former professional wrestler not named Dwayne Johnson or John Cena, which means you're probably not in for a good time. And if you think that, you would be correct. It is just terrible, but he's not the only bad one. All of the acting is terrible, with the possible exception of somehow the legendary Jane Seymour ended up in this crap fest, and I would say that her performance is tolerable. If anything, the problem is the role they wrote for her, but she does what she can with it. But this is pretty unbearably bad to watch from an acting perspective. But the acting is not the worst thing about the Guardians of Justice. The production values are far, far worse. This thing looks like a student film project, and I do not mean a college student film project. This looks like something a bunch of high schoolers would do. College film projects are much more competently directed than this piece of crap. It looks horrible. The production quality and the quality of the video, it looks like it's somewhere between an episode of Days of Our Lives and one of the old Tom Baker episodes of Doctor Who. It just looks awful on screen, and it just looks so cheap and so low budget. Again, it looks like a bunch of high schoolers would have put this thing together. All of the action sequences in the movie, well, I won't say all, the vast majority of the action sequences in the movie are done with animation. And the live action is just mainly people talking and character development. And, you know, on the one hand, sure, it's cool to see all that animation, but you can't help but get the feeling that they had practically no money to make this thing with, and so anything that would have required any money at all, they just did with animation. And there's no nice way to say it. This thing just is unbearably horrible to look at visually. Finally, just the overall premise of the Guardians of Justice has been done to death. The whole grim, gritty remake slash spoof slash satire of the superhero genre. This thing is a very, very, very thinly disguised take on Watchmen. And of course, if you know anything about Watchmen, you know that Watchmen, in effect, was a spoof of a superhero series. So what you have is, in effect, something that's a copy of a copy. When you make copies of copies, the quality rarely improves, and that is the case here. I mean, Watchmen is interesting. I read Watchmen back either in 1989 or 1990. I was in college, so it had not been too long since it came out when I first read it, and it was really innovative and relevant at the time. But let's be honest, once you get to around 2020 or the current year 2022 and start looking back on Watchmen, it did not age well, and it starts looking a bit like a piece of left-wing paranoia. Now, with the Russians rolling tanks into Ukraine, maybe it will become relevant again. We'll see. But regardless, doing a copy of something that didn't age well does not make me want to watch The Guardians of Justice. It's just the entire premise of it is old and predictable, and when you combine an old, predictable premise with horrible acting and worse production values, you've got something that I just absolutely cannot recommend that you watch. So, in summary, I do not recommend Netflix's new series, The Guardians of Justice. It is a tired old premise with horrible acting and worse production values. I would not waste my time on it, but I know a lot of you are going to watch it anyway, because let's be honest, a lot of us are superhero buffs and we just can't not watch. Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to watch it anyway. For every 10 people that watch this, 1 to 2 are going to think it is absolutely brilliant. It's just going to click with them and they're going to think it's the greatest thing ever. 4 to 5 will bail out probably within the first 15 minutes, and the balance will watch it till the end, not because it's good, but because in part they're kind of holding out hope that maybe something good is finally going to happen, but in part just because it's like the train wreck that you just cannot look away from, and that's the category I was in. I watched this thing all the way to the end, not because I liked it, but I kind of felt compelled, like I couldn't stop watching it. There was a comedy series from Australia years ago called Danger 5 that I had a similar relationship to. I thought the concept of Danger 5 was hysterical, but the execution just was never funny, and yet I had to watch it all the way to the end because in the back of my mind I was hoping, all right, maybe something funny's finally going to happen, or maybe I'm missing something. cannot recommend The Guardians of Justice. Now, the critics are going to love this. A lot of critics are raving about it. Do not be fooled. That is not because this thing is good and worth watching. It is because they want to be on the Adi Shankar hype train. They want to say good things about this because they want to show that they are cool, they are hip, they are relevant, they are part of the in crowd. I am not part of the Hollywood in crowd, nor do I aspire to be a part of the Hollywood in crowd. I do my reviews based purely upon whether or not I think somebody will actually enjoy watching something, and I'm telling you, I doubt you will enjoy watching this. So, if you decide to watch it anyway, and the first few minutes of it you think it's really good, by all means enjoy. I won't say don't watch it, but if you're one of those people that get a few minutes into it and say, oh, this is awful, go ahead and bail out because it does not get any better. Well, that's all for now. Remember, new full-length episodes of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat air every Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, so please check it out. Subscribe on social media if you can, and you can always access old videos there. In the meantime, I am Steve the Cat, wishing you a great week. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.